Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Into the Shadows, a show where all I do is stories of the scary, the strange, and the supernatural. The story this week is one we used to pass around when I worked on the oil rigs, a tale of fear and the unknown. Be warned, you'll want some heavy duty cleaning supplies to make it to the end of this story. Mac Hammer stared at the pine trees surrounding his site. Even though he was a large and tough lifetime oil rigger, the greenery of the forest was a nice change from the empty plains they had been drilling recently. He was standing on top of his mixing tanks, watching dirt and material from deep down their drilling hole come across his sifting screens, and taking samples every few minutes. They were far up north here at Wolf Lake to drill some exploratory wells for the company, and it truly was the middle of nowhere. The trees went on for thousands of acres around their site, the deep green stretching out as far as his eyes could see. He thought to himself that he was one of the few people to ever see this site, and that once they were gone, it would likely be hundreds of years before anyone was back up here. Unless they found something valuable in the earth below, that was. His thoughts were interrupted by his equipment. Suddenly, among the dirt and material, he sees something oily come across his filter screens. It's unlike the other oil or tar that he sometimes sees, and they weren't expecting to hit any oil here. The area wasn't suitable for it. He took off his glove and touched it, rubbing it between his fingers. It was weird. It felt smooth, like no oil he had ever felt, and it made his fingers tingle. It was also clear and seemed to shimmer. As he watched, it faded down into the screens and into the fluid mix underneath it. He had no idea what it could have been. Confused, he radioed in the geologist to come over and see him. Mac tells him about what he had seen, and the geologist confirmed they shouldn't have been hitting any oil or tar sands, but said that's why they were drilling exploratory holes. Unsure of what it could have been, the two men try to find some of the substance for testing, but there's no sign of the oily, shimmering fluid. Just a warm tingle on his fingers where he had touched it. Unable to find any trace of it, the geologist leaves and tells Mac to grab a sample next time he sees it, either in the tank or coming across the screen. Mac settles back into his routine, lighting up a smoke and watching the screens as they drilled down miles into the earth. By the time he finished his smoke, his fingers had started to sting a little. He looked down at them, and seeing they were also a little red where he had touched the oily substance, he went and scrubbed them. But the scrubbing didn't seem to help, and the pain slowly increased. Cursing about his now peeling, burning fingers, Mac went to see the medic. He described the situation to her, and not knowing what it could be, she gave him some cream for caustic chemical burns. The burning sensation was better almost immediately, and she bandaged up his hand for him. Relieved, Mac went back to work, keeping an eye out for that oily substance. He was more unsure than ever about what it was now, but he did know that he wasn't going to touch it again. He had never had anything from a hole do that to him. His hands were tough, hard, and thick-skinned from a lifetime of labor and handling chemicals, and this stuff had chewed through his skin in less than an hour. For the next 8 hours or so he watched, and every now and then he thought he saw a small dollar coin-sized bit come across the screen, but they always sank through the screens into the tank below before he could grab a sample. The clear liquid had already been hard enough to see amid all the other fluids and materials, let alone small amounts like these. He walked back and forth across his tanks, looking down through the metal grates that served as the floor. His footsteps rattled the grates in their place as his heavy frame passed over the tanks, but looking down through them, the fluids in his tanks looked normal. He had gotten to the far side of the tank and was just about to head back over when he saw it. A large patch of clear fluid inside his tank. All the little pieces he had seen coming across his screen must have joined together in one large mass. It was about 5 feet long by 2 feet wide, and oval-shaped, at least a couple inches thick from what he could see. It was definitely the stuff from earlier. It had that same shimmering appearance. As Max stood over it looking down, he couldn't think of anything like it that he had seen before. He decided he would go get the geologist. He turned and started to walk away, his footsteps clanging the grates around, when suddenly the clanging stopped. Mac stopped also. He had worked here years, and he had never heard it not clang before. It was so strange that it gave him pause. He took another couple steps. Quiet also. The grate he was on wasn't rattling around all loose like they normally would. He turned in curiosity to look around the tank to see what was different, and he almost fell over in shock, grabbing at the railing near him and squeezing it in horror and disbelief. The oily substance had raised itself up out of the fluid of the tank, a large blob half passing through the grate and stretching out in long fingers up into the cold night air. It was large and clear, and Mac could see the green trees behind it, distorted by the oily mass now before him. That was enough for Mac, and he turned and bolted off the tank. His feet never even touched the stairs as he ran off the tank. He ran to the geologist's trailer, not for any particular reason, but almost as if in reflex. The last place his mind had consciously wanted to go was the geologist's trailer, and in his fear, that was where his body went. By the time he got there, he was out of breath and barely jogging. As he got closer to the trailer, he saw the geologist come outside to greet him, and for the first time, he had to think of what he was about to say. The geologist had seen him from across the site and assumed Mac had a sample for him. "Did you see any more of that stuff?" he asked. Mac stood there a moment as his brain tried to work out this situation. He had certainly seen it, but what he had seen defied all reason. He couldn't tell this man the truth. It sounded crazy. It was crazy. The geo would surely tell the rest of the crews, and Mac would be a laughing stock. He couldn't tell the geologist anything. "No," he forced out the words, trying to sound natural amid his heavy breaths. "Nothing. I didn't see anything." The geo was confused at why Mac had ran over to his trailer just to tell him that, but people acting strange wasn't unusual out there, and he didn't want to stand outside in the cold for no reason. "Well, keep an eye out in the tanks for any. I'd really like a sample," he said, and turned, hopping back up into his trailer and leaving Mac outside trying to catch his breath and thoughts. Screw the tanks, and screw the sampling, he thought to himself. There was no way he was going back up there today. There was only a couple more hours left on the shift till they changed over with the night shift crew. He knew how to work the system and planned to spend the rest of the shift looking busy and avoiding the tanks. But he could not avoid the oily mass. A short time later, he was in the mixing room, cutting open chem bags and dumping them into the hopper when he spotted it. A shimmer in the corner of his eye. His head snapped to the side, and he stared at it. There it was, the oily patch from the mixing tanks, but now it was on the wall of the mixing room to his left. Horrified, he jumped backwards off his stool, knocking it to the floor and spilling his bag all over. Without taking his eyes off the thing on the wall, he sidestepped to the door. It was hard to see because it was clear, but the shimmer gave it away. It was spread over the wall like a stain the size of a man, and as he watched, it seemed to ripple, and then it was stretching out away from the wall in tendrils, the arms elongating and reaching towards Mac. Mac bolted the last few steps out of the small room, and once a few meters outside, he turned, looking through the doorway of the mixing shack as he stood in the cold air. He watched as the tendrils retracted back into the oily mass, and it flattened back against the wall. Luckily, the door to the mixing room swung outwards, and Mac slammed it shut with a crash. That was enough for him. He would stay outside the rest of his shift. He was almost done, almost headed back to camp. Whatever this thing was, it was night shift's problem now, and he wanted nothing to do with these terrifying events. A short time later, he saw the lights of the crew truck shine through the now darkened trees, and he knew his nightmare was almost over. He did the fastest shift handover he had ever done, carefully avoiding all mention of the oily patch to his night shift counterpart. Mac was the first one in the crew truck, and as he sat there, he saw the other crew start to go about their shift, and watched as his counterpart opened up the door to the mixing shack and went inside, shutting the door behind him. Mac held his breath, staring at the closed door as his other crew members got into the truck. But no one ran out in terror. The door to the mixing shack remained shut as the last of his crew got in the truck, and the truck started its long drive through the woods back to camp. Back at camp, he may have avoided the oily mass, but he couldn't avoid his thoughts. He was on edge, staring at corners and surfaces, unable to rest. He had barely touched his dinner, leaving the rest of the guys at the mess hall as he headed back to his room. He was still reeling from the events of the day, and he was mentally and emotionally exhausted. He opens the door to his shared room and lays down on his bed, staring up at the ceiling. Suddenly, to his horror, he sees it in his room, a shimmering on the wall next to his bed. He rolls out of the bed and crashes to the floor. As he bounds up, he sees the oily shimmer stretching its arms out of the wall towards him, and he recoils in fear, almost falling backwards again. He turned, and with one big stride, he was at the door to the little room, and he burst through it into the hallway, slamming it shut behind him. He stood in the hallway with his back against the opposite wall, staring at the door to his room, trying to figure out what had just happened. He sees his roommate come into the hallway and start walking towards Mac and their room. His mind raced, but he didn't know what to say to his roommate. He couldn't tell him there was a shimmering, oily spot in there trying to grab him. He could only stand there as the other man walked up, told Mac he was heading to bed and to be quiet coming in later, opened the door and strolled into the room. As the door shut, Mac was still standing there silent, frozen with confusion and indecision. As the seconds dragged on, he decided to at least get out of the hallway. There was no noise from inside the room. Maybe he was losing his marbles, Mac thought. But no, he looked down at his bandaged fingers that were still aching and burning. The shimmer was real, and it had followed him back to camp somehow. Mac decided the best course of action was to go to the commons room. It was well lit, it had comfortable couches, and it was also far enough away from his room to put his mind at ease. But only so much. He couldn't focus on anything on the TV, and he kept looking at the walls, looking for that shimmer. What was it? How did it follow him? Did it travel through walls? And what was it? He stayed in there all night, his brain and heart racing too much for sleep to be possible. In the morning, he went back to his room to get his toothbrush and clothes for the day's shift. He hesitated at the door, hand hovering above the knob. Then he pushed down the feeling of fear, turned the knob, and went inside. There was no sign of his roommate, and no sign of the oily sheen that had been on the wall next to his bed. The room seemed normal, nothing out of the ordinary. His roommate wasn't there, but he was probably up early at the mess hall, eating like usual. Mac quickly grabbed his stuff and headed off to the bathroom to change. It seemed like it took him ages to get ready. Between the lack of sleep and looking over his shoulder constantly, by the time he finished washing, it was almost time to get into the crew truck. As he hurried to the truck, he passed the kitchen, but even the delicious smells drifting into the hallway didn't make him stop. He had no appetite. Food was the last thing on his mind. He hops into the truck to the usual morning chatter. How cold it was supposed to be that day, how the breakfast was, what supper was supposed to be. The driver starts to pull away, and Mac notices his roommate isn't in the truck. He tells the driver to hold up, they are short a guy. The driver and a couple of the crew laugh. They told him they hadn't seen Mac's roommate all morning, and that the other day he had been telling them about some girl who wanted to shack up with him. They all assumed he had met up with her last night, and had ignored his alarm this morning. He was known to pull stunts like this, and the fellas were used to him showing up late the next morning with coffee and stories to tell. But as the truck pulled out of the camp and headed up to the trails to their site, Mac felt something was very wrong. As the morning went on, Mac kept looking for the shimmer everywhere he went. He also kept an eye out for his roommate's truck, but neither ever appeared. As it turned to noon and then afternoon, the crew had turned from amused to annoyed. It was not uncommon for riggers to go on a bender and disappear, or to just not show up for their shift and never be back. The crew assumed it was one of those two options, all but Mac. Mac knew about the shimmer, how it had been in the room. Mac thought it had to be related. When they finished their shift and had made it back to camp, a couple of the crew asked Mac if they could come into his room to see if his roommate's stuff was gone like they expected. But when they entered the room, all of the roommate's stuff was still there, nothing missing, and his truck was still parked outside. This made the crew think that he was probably on a bender somewhere, and he would just show back up soon enough. But it made Mac terrified to his core. His roommate had told him he was going to sleep. The man was not out partying. Mac tried to think of what could have happened, but he couldn't. The two men from his crew left the room, shutting the door behind them. To Mac's horror, when they shut the door, he sees the shimmer. It was on the back of the door, bigger now, and it was blocking his only exit. He sees it start to ripple and extend outwards, reaching those long arms like tentacles of liquid glass out towards him. Terrified out of his mind, Mac turns and runs towards the one window in the room. He leaps into it, the weight of the large man smashing through glass and frame, tumbling all together to the ground 1 story below. When Detective Ripley arrives at the scene to investigate an apparent suicide, he wasn't sure what to make of it. While suicide in isolated camps wasn't unheard of, most people opened windows before they jumped. The circumstances seemed very strange, but the victim's co-worker said he had seemed very off the last few days, and had been acting erratically around 2 people just moments before he apparently jumped. As he looked out the broken frame where the window used to be, he looked down at the body under the tarp. Strange or not, it seemed like a clear-cut case. He turned and started to walk out of the room when he sees a weird shimmer on the wall. He takes off his glove and touches it, rubbing it between his fingers. It was weird. It felt smooth, like no oil he had ever felt, and it made his fingers tingle. And that's the story for today, guys. I hope you liked it, and if you did, then share this video with a friend. I do stories like this every week, so share a scare, and stay spooky, friends. I'll see you soon on the next one.